finally, this season turns back into chaos. That's what we saw at the beginning of the season, and then things really leveled off there in the month of October. But yesterday, this looked more like what we were seeing at the beginning of the season, and that's just the first takeaway here. We are now in November, and I talked about that last week, how if things don't change, if we don't start seeing some upsets, we're gonna have, like, it's gonna be different than any other season we've ever seen in terms of like one-loss teams outside of the playoff, outside of the top 10, all these things we talked about. And I said last week, when you get to the month of November, the pressure can start to build for these teams, and I think that's what we saw already. We saw so many upsets here this past weekend or yesterday. Several upsets, several big games, some surprises. That's kind of, we're going to kind of get into those upsets as we go through the rest of the takeaways. Just kind of a big takeaway here is we're in the month of November. The playoff rankings come out on Tuesday. The pressure is going to continue to build for a lot of these teams, and I think we're going to see more of this. And a lot of the questions that we had, they're going to take care of themselves. We'll still have, I'm sure, some three-way ties and things like that, but I think a lot of the chaos scenarios that we thought we might get, we're getting the chaos, but the chaos scenarios where we're going to have undefeated teams left out of their conference championships, things like that, that's off the table now. We will not have an undefeated team left out of a conference championship, because the ACC only has 2 now, and the Big 12 only has 1. Well, they only had 2 to begin with. The Big Ten now only has 2. So that scenario is not going to happen. So let's get into the other takeaways and kind of go through each conference. So we'll start with the Big 12. Chaos in the Big 12 this past weekend. So Iowa State was sitting up there at the top with BYU, undefeated. They go down. So Iowa State now no longer undefeated in the Big 12, but it wasn't really just about them. I tell you what, I didn't even realize they were playing. I didn't even realize the game was on until I saw the score, like in the fourth quarter. I watched the end of the game. Kansas State goes down to Houston. What? Kansas State goes down to Houston. I did not see that one coming. That was totally off the radar. That was a shocker. And I haven't really heard anybody talking about that game. It got no attention because of all the other big games that were on. But Kansas State lost to Houston. In case you missed that, yes, Kansas State lost to Houston. So now you've got BYU sitting at the top. They're undefeated, but they haven't played a November game yet. The pressure hasn't really started for them yet. We'll see what happens as they finish out their season. They still got 4 games to go. Iowa State, they've got the loss now. Colorado only has 1 loss. So it's now BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado at the top. Same thing for Colorado. Unless I missed BYU and Colorado, if they were on ESPN Plus or something, and I don't know. But I did not see BYU or Colorado, either one of them, having a game on Saturday. Again, apologies if I missed their game. But if I'm correct there, they have not played a November game. So the pressure is going to start to build for those teams. And then you've got Kansas State, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, Arizona State, and West Virginia, all with 2 losses. We could definitely see a 2-loss team get into the Big 12 championship. We should at least get one loss team or an undefeated team between BYU, Iowa State, and Colorado. You feel like out of those 3 teams, one of them will be sitting there with 1 loss or potentially undefeated if it's BYU. But I think that other team's going to probably be a 2-loss team. Which one will emerge? Will we have a huge tiebreaker scenario there? I don't know. That's going to be interesting to watch. With the Big 12, we got chaos. And that's really all it took. That's all it took was a couple of upsets. And now who knows what's going to happen in this conference. Let's go to the ACC now. So Miami and SMU now on a collision course in the ACC. So there's a couple of different things to talk about here. First, the positives. Miami and SMU, they got big wins on Saturday. Miami continues to, I don't know what you call it. They just continue to mess around and then take care of business late in the game. How many times have we seen this with this team? They've only got 3 games left, and they're going to be big favorites in those games. I think that they just know how to win. They've learned how to win. They can come from behind. They can, there's different ways they can win. Really just impressed with Miami. Now, we've seen them struggle at times in these games, and if those struggles, creep up, they could lose. They could get upset, but it feels like they're in pretty good shape. SMU's got a favorable schedule down the stretch. They're undefeated in the conference. So those two teams on a collision course. We could still see an upset, of course, but as of right now, those teams are at the top. So then the big story here is, well, first of all, Pittsburgh, they go down, so they lose their first game. But Clemson losing to Louisville, that was the big surprise here. I didn't see it coming. I think we learned that Clemson was overrated, and I did talk about that. It was on the Upset Alert video last week. I talked about how Clemson really hadn't played anyone since Georgia, and we're just assuming because they've won these games easily that they're a really good team. We really don't know. And it turns out, by the way, Georgia's got problems. Georgia is not an elite team this year. They played like it against Texas, but for the most part, they have not played like that. They struggled against Florida on Saturday. But anyways, yeah, Clemson, they were overrated. You got an ACC now with Miami and SMU at the top. If we see chaos, though, there are still 2 lost teams lurking as well. Louisville, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. So, there are some scenarios there. But, I do not see Miami and SMU. I don't see either one of those teams losing 2 games. So, I feel like those 2 lost teams are out of it. Clemson really hoping that SMU or Miami gets upset somewhere and then they can maybe win a tiebreaker. But it feels like Miami and SMU there, again, should win out. And I say, though, they should win out, but I didn't expect Texas Tech to beat Iowa State. I didn't expect Houston to beat Kansas State, so we'll see. But let's go to number 4 now. Ohio State versus Indiana will likely be a play-in game in the Big Ten. So the biggest game of the weekend, Ohio State beating Penn State. Very impressed with this Ohio State team. I talked about it on my playoff prediction video. I've had them winning the national championship all year long. I really didn't feel like, just last week, I did not feel like they were the team that was going to do it, but I wanted to give them one more game, a chance to prove themselves to me, to be the team that I thought they would be, and because I didn't want to drop them out and then have them look really good like they did against Penn State. This game really wasn't even that close. I know the score was close, but the turnovers for Ohio State really kept Penn State in the game. Penn State's offense couldn't do much. They just lack weapons in the passing game. Drew Aller actually, I thought, played pretty well, especially running the ball around. Not really his strength, but he gave them a chance. But I feel like the receivers for Penn State, and that was the thing going into this season. We knew that they were not going to be great, and they have not been great. So we were correct there. But yeah, Ohio State, the offensive line, they moved some players around, looked great up front. The run game was there. Will Howard, made some mistakes, but he's a gamer. He's a gamer. Runs the football when he needs to. I think he's a championship quarterback, and I think this Ohio State team can win a national championship. So many weapons around him on offense. And then on the other side, Indiana, slow start against Michigan State, but then they pull away. They win big. Curtis Rourke back. So these 2 teams going to play. Winner will go to the Big Ten championship. More than likely, though, the loser's still in the playoff. If Indiana loses, you do kind of question their resume a little bit. I'm really curious to see where they're going to be ranked on Tuesday, but it feels like that's going to be the case. So, yeah, but you want to get to that Big Ten championship. You want to have a chance to play for that first round bye. These 2 teams have now have set up that game. Penn State, unless we see some upsets, Penn State not going to go to the Big Ten championship, and Oregon pretty much locked in. Don't see them losing a game. So number 5, takeaway, SEC. SEC is still wide open. So the big story, of course, was South Carolina beating Texas A&M. Actually, it was not a huge upset. The spread was like 2.5 points, but it felt like a big upset because Texas A&M was the top team in the SEC, ranked in the top 10. South Carolina not ranked. So that was a huge upset, huge win for South Carolina. Ole Miss looked good. Ole Miss looked really good in their game. A game that I thought they could potentially lose to Arkansas. Georgia did not look good. If DJ Lagway does not go down in that game, I think Florida probably wins it. I think Florida probably wins that game. They looked like the better team there for a while, but he went down and Georgia did what they do. They found a way to score, take that lead, and then of course the defensive touchdown, with the interception late gave them a chance to make the score look a little bit make it look a little bit more like an easy win for them, but it really was not. If you watch that game, you would know. So yeah, we got chaos here in the SEC potentially with I don't know. So let's look. Georgia, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Texas, and LSU, all with 1 loss. just from the one-loss teams, Georgia plays Tennessee, Texas A&M plays Texas. So you know that's going to get narrowed down to at the most we can have 2 one-loss teams, but I mean we could see plenty more losses than that. I think the 2-loss teams are still alive. You look at Vanderbilt with just 2 losses. That is interesting. I can't remember who all plays who all. It's with these schedules, but I know Ole Miss plays Georgia. That's going to be a huge game. If Ole Miss can win that, then they're definitely still alive. If Alabama can beat LSU, they're definitely still alive. Missouri's sitting there with 2 losses. I don't know if there's a path for them. They probably lose like all the tiebreakers because their schedule is a lot easier. But I don't think a 3-loss team has a chance, but absolutely we could see a 2-loss team in the SEC championship. So some huge games still to be played in this conference. And it starts next weekend with Georgia, Ole Miss, LSU, Alabama. And then after that, we go into Georgia, Tennessee. We've got Texas A&M at the end of the season. So this SEC race is going to be a lot of fun going down the stretch. And I don't know who's going to make it out. I just don't. I don't know who's going to make it. And we could see several 2-loss teams. So what if we get like 7 2-loss teams? Will all 7 of them get into the college football playoff? I mean, there is a lot to be sorted out in the SEC, but that conference definitely still wide open as we head into Week 11. So those are my big takeaways from Week 10. Give me your takeaways down in the comments below.